Good evening and welcome to the TNT show, The Nation Talks. And we've been talking to the nation and for the nation and about the nation now for well on 2 years and a bit. We're always happy to welcome you to our show every Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Why? Well, because we feel that A, you ought to put something back. Secondly, and probably more importantly, we're your antidote to the BBC. In other words, when you look at their broadcasts, when you look at their material, and you're so concerned about the lack of, let's put it this way, balance, then you can come here and we'll strive mightily to put the other side of the argument and the issue. The stuff that doesn't make it on air. Doesn't make it on air. Why? Because it's too long, too complicated. Yeah. It just doesn't fit the corporate agenda. And that's why coming here was a very smart move. And I hope you'll stay with us to the end of the programme. We've got some interesting things to share with you. Let me just say one thing in particular, a couple of things before I introduce our very fine guest tonight. One, a Labour minister lied about Scotland's water. I can tell you, I've travelled around a fair bit to different countries, different parts of the world. And Scotland's water is fantastic. I mean, really. Now, to say that it's not fantastic because somebody came across a turd on Portobello Beach, frankly, is childish, you know. And whoever said it or whoever alluded to it, they really ought to apologise. Not to Scotland, because Scotland is used to critics who are, as it were, slightly detached from reality, but rather to themselves, because the whole process of lying in public is deeply corrosive. It really is. I'll give you an example. Look at Donald Trump in the United States and see what happens if you're allowed to lie and lie and lie. For example, the president is now denying involvement with Epstein, who, as you know, had a very unsavoury reputation and met an even more unsavoury end, all deeply, deeply dubious. Now, eventually reality bites and Trump's rating has collapsed. He is disapproved of on all major issues. This is breaking news, by the way. But having said that, in fairness, and we like to be fair on this programme, as you know, there is one other president whose ratings, however poor President Trump's ratings are just now, there's another president whose ratings were comparable. Unhappily for Donald Trump, that other president was Donald Trump. And who knows? Anyway, you're about to see what happens when people act in a hugely unbalanced way, because when he comes to Scotland, you'll be at pains to figure out and discern any malfeasance on his part. You'll be treated to a royal presence, genuflecting, and welcoming a convicted felon, somebody who probably wouldn't be allowed into the United States if he weren't president. But it's very corrupting and it's very corrosive. And what it does over time, it subtracts eventually from you and me, because we need morality in our lives. Ethics is important. And the more politicians act as if it isn't, the more and the deeper the effect of that is upon the character of public discourse and the way we conduct ourselves. We elect people not to be liars, but to represent us faithfully. And it's for actually the people who suffer most are the people who lie continually and consistently. Because apart from the fact you need an awfully good memory, it also debases you as a person, because you work to a different moral code to the one that you feel intrinsically comfortable with. And that's not good for you. That's not good for you psychologically, I suspect, as well as physically. Anyway, enough of all that. Those corrosive thoughts will be something that we could probably touch upon later on other subjects. It's my great and profound pleasure to welcome two good friends of the programme tonight, Leah Gunn Barrett and John Proctor, and they'll be talking about nuclear energy amongst other very important things. So without any further ado, welcome Leah, welcome John. How are you both?
Fine, thanks very much for having us.
It's a great pleasure. John, how are you?
I'm well, John. It's a pleasure to be back on TNT.
It's a pleasure to welcome you both back. How are things at Arran?
Oh, it's beautiful as ever. It's shining, and I'm very lucky to be here.
You are indeed, and I'm somewhat envious, I have to say. But anyway, I'll be in Scotland in a couple of weeks' time, and I'm looking forward to it. I looked at the long-range weather forecast, and it says rain, which is...
Makes that water all the better.
It does. More of it, I say. And Leah, you're speaking to us from Edinburgh.
That's right, and it's also a beautiful evening in Edinburgh.
I can see the reflection in the painting behind you. It looks absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
But let's talk about something that's not quite so gorgeous. Let's talk about nuclear power. Starting with you, John, what's your take on the way nuclear energy, that whole activity in Scotland, is being run, being conducted? What is your feeling? Should Scots be grateful that they have nuclear power on their doorstep?
Well, I'm going to maybe start. Your intro touched upon lying, and I don't know if that's coincidence, but that's one of the key things I want to talk about tonight, if possible, because the amount of lies we're seeing coming out from the pro-nuclear lobby on the benefits of nuclear are significant, and so that's I think, and we'll maybe return to this theme a few times on this podcast. We do not need nuclear power. We have a massive surplus of energy in Scotland. I'll explore that a little bit on the call. It costs a fortune, and I'm really waiting for our friends in the Labour government to explain how the costs are going to see a reduction of £300 in a bill. And it's certainly something Scottish people don't want. And I think it represents a massive opportunity for the pro-independence parties coming up for the Holyrood 2026 election. SNP, ALBA and Liberty and others to go head-to-head against Labour, Tories and Reform, because they are all pro-nuclear. So I think it sets up very nicely for that election. And we will come back to that because, as you know, Scotland has a moratorium on new nuclear facilities. And I think that it's very important that we retain that moratorium. Just a little link. I'm part of Energy Scotland, which is a group of professionals who are committed to the future of Scotland's energy. We see it as a massive opportunity. And we were recently invited to speak at the IFS Convention on Scotland's Future. And it was very clear that the people there thought that nuclear was not required, and they passed a resolution to that effect saying that they support the Scottish Government's ongoing moratorium. So that's what I think of nuclear. I don't want to take too much more time and give Leah a chance to kick the cat.
One question for you, Leah, if I may. In some of the material you were kind enough to share with me earlier, there is a most extraordinary statistic that Hinkley Point C's costs are £46 billion and counting, which greatly exceeds the entire £41 billion devolved budget for Scotland.
And that's extraordinary, isn't it? Yeah, and that's just one of the UK's white elephants, nuclear white elephants. And then you've also got Sizewell C, and the BBC just reported their costs have ballooned to £38 billion and counting. And it won't be operational until the late 2030s, if at all. And the UK government is putting in, I think it's 14.2 billion in subsidies, because the private sector won't touch nuclear with a barge pole without government guarantees. So it's just fundamentally uneconomic. But of course, and then Rachel Reeves, this is if you realize, she raided the GB Energy £8.3 billion fund of £2.5 billion to throw it towards these small modular reactors, which John knows really are not commercially viable. There's no design that actually works. There are only two operating in the entire planet, one in China and one in Russia, and they're both operating at less than 30% efficiency. And yet they're throwing all this money against something it's never even be commercially viable. It's crazy.
It sounds very, very bad. I mean, I want to come on to some further aspects of this, but I want to take a question from our listeners, our viewers, please. It's for you, John. The question is, could John please update us on new pump storage hydro?
Well, I don't have much details about the status of the projects, but I do think that those projects make a huge amount of sense. I really just, the projects, I guess, we're talking the ones in Loch Ness that I think Scottish Southern are developing. I love the concept of pumped hydro. I think it's a great, it delivers in terms of capacity. It ticks the box in terms of decarbonisation. Also provides you with ancillary services, which again we'll come back to. But the problem is that they've got a very long planning cycle, and I'm not familiar with the status of that, if I'm candid.
Sorry, who imposes the planning cycle? Is it local authorities? Is it Scottish government? Who is it?
Again, generally speaking, these will be involved with flooding areas in the Highlands, and there'll be all sorts of environmental planning requirements to get to that point where that moves into construction. So much as I'd love if we could build more pump storage, because it really works very well in terms of the overall energy mix. I think it's a long putt to get to there, but equaled by the very, very long putt to build the nuke program. But we'll come back to that.
Yeah, Lee, tell us a bit about Sellafield, because what a big concern for lots of people is waste. Not only the cost of building the damn things, but they're terribly worried about what happens to all the waste that's left. I mean, where is the waste kept in the UK? Is it kept in Scotland?
Some of it is, but all of the waste from commercial nuclear power plants in the UK end up at Sellafield, which has been called, it is Europe's most toxic nuclear site. And I think one quote described it as a bottomless pit of hell, money, and despair. Poor Cumbria. I mean, Cumbria is a beautiful area of the Lake District. It's being horribly polluted, and Scotland is getting the worst of it because the currents will then take this water, toxic water, up the west coast. And scientists have found our shellfish on the west coast, 160 miles north of Sellafield, are contaminated with nuclear contaminants, with cesium and all sorts of nasty things. And the cleanup costs of Sellafield, talking about costs, they're estimated at the moment, of course, again, that's rising too, at 136 billion pounds. So it's absolutely enormous. And it's been polluting Scotland's waters, driving up our cancer rate. We are known as the cancer capital of Europe and possibly the world, because not only nuclear power plant toxicity, but of course you've got the nuclear weapons facilities, Faslane and Coalport, and these rust bucket leaky subs are going up and down the Clyde, and strewing all sorts of toxicity, in our waters. So, and of course, they don't want it down in Southeast England. Scotland's a very convenient, out of sight, out of mind place to keep, nuclear weapons. And another dirty little secret that the politicians probably don't want us to know about is that nuclear weapons need nuclear power in Scotland. Nuclear power plants actually help subsidize our nuclear weapons program. There was a 2017 University of Sussex report saying that if you didn't have nuclear power, the cost of the Trident program would be insupportable. So we're basically using nuclear power to subsidize the military nuclear infrastructure, which is horrendous. And that's only to prop up the flaccid UK's national virility symbol, which is nuclear weapons,
Which they can't use without Trump's permission.
Oh, that's true. But also, Trident has failed spectacularly 2 tests, one in 2014 and 2016 and one in 2024. They both just utterly failed flat out. And so, the UK, after even these failures, says it's the most reliable weapons system in the world, which is hilarious. That's a joke. It's not true at all. And as you say, the US sort of controls things because the subs go to Georgia for servicing in the US state of Georgia. They don't even service them here in the UK.
I mean, it's ludicrous, isn't it? All of these
Yeah.
connections between, I mean, you could argue nuclear weapons are a heinous thing anyway, but the notion, I mean, it does sound like, the way you describe it, it sounds like some witch's brew. In other words, you keep putting stuff into this great cauldron, and everything you put in makes it actually worse than it was before. And by golly, it was bad to start with.
Yeah, and you mentioned waste. There is no safe solution or storage method for nuclear waste, and yet the UK government is committing itself to building more of these things. It's really unconscionable, and it's immoral. It's wrong, as well as being economically lunatic.
So who's asking for these things? I mean,
the industry, I think the corporate nuclear lobby has a lot of influence. I mean, we just had a meeting the 1st of May by this lobby group called Britain Remade. It's being funded by the nuclear industry, and their campaign in Scotland is to try to reverse the SNP ban on new nuclear. They've been very clear about that. And Aina Sarwar, as I call him, accused the SNP of depriving Scotland of billions in investment and jobs, which again, it's just, John would say, there's just outright lies. It's just the same dude who couldn't even save Grangemouth and his 500 jobs despite saying that he would. And then you've got Viceroy Murray, another one who's pushing nuclear. He even removed his name from the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons pledge. And so English labor is bankrolled by the industry. And Tony Blair is actually one of its biggest cheerleaders and beneficiaries. His institute published a 2024 pro-nuclear report that the industry just loved. So, this is where it's all coming from. These guys are corrupted by money. And that's why, the people don't have any say. It's being pushed onto us. But we have to try to change that here in Scotland.
Well, you betcha. And this is perhaps one measure of doing so. I need to ask you another question that's come to us from the audience, John, if you don't mind. Can you give us an update on zonal pricing? Because some people are still slightly confused about why it matters, what it is, why it matters, and why it should matter, particularly to Scotland.
Well, obviously we know Scotland has a surplus of energy. 95% of the days we are exporting energy to England and beyond. So we have areas where that you see people are blighted. If you consider wind turbines a blight, or consider the various grid lines that are going down to take the energy from Scotland down to England. And so you see all that energy being generated in Scotland and seeing no benefit from it. And so one of the solutions that Greg Jackson of Octopus, CEO of Octopus Energy, he's been a strong advocate of zonal pricing on the basis that the areas that have the greatest amount of supply should benefit from the lower pricing. There's a lot of discussion on that, with the pluses and minuses of that. There is a double-edged sword there, but there are various models or refinements on that. There is actually a slightly more sophisticated model that we've been looking at there that is based upon zonal pricing. But the key thing here is we need to get gas off of the being the marginal unit that sets the price. Gas is very expensive. So that is actually the market reform that's required. And what I can't believe, after 14 years in opposition, the Labour government finally get a chance to do something. And after a year, they fumble the ball. Now, I don't think they fumbled the ball. I think they've just been gotten at by the incumbents, who basically are in. They're in. I've got to be careful what I say here, but the incumbents would much prefer not to see zonal pricing. It can give benefits to areas of heavy supply, but there are other challenges that come with that. So I think we could spend a lot of time. We ought to perhaps have a separate show on pricing and energy market reform, John, because it's quite a complicated topic at one level, and we need to break it down sensibly.
Yeah, speak to Kevin, the producer, afterwards, and we'll make some time for that, because I can guarantee you if we don't meet the time, nobody else will. They
Yeah.
just won't. And because you've all been at the rough end of trying to get some traction on some of these issues, and it's very, very difficult.
The simple thing for me is this.
Yeah, company tomorrow and sit down with a minister, pretty much. But if I ask a minister to come on the show and talk about these things.
Apologies. For me, the simple thing, John, is they should tackle this now and get on with it. It's important. You know, the Labour come in with the pledges for decarbonisation. You know, the policy costs are still getting loaded on to electricity rather than gas. You know, so you look at the whole strategic programme. They really should have embraced energy market reform. So I think they missed a big opportunity there. But again, we'll come back to that. I want to maybe give Leah a chance. Sorry, I feel as if I'm hogging.
Yeah, one of the questions, Leah, was like, if you could tell us a little bit about why nuclear is not economic. Because, you know, if I open any of the public prints, one of the selling points with a large S and a large P is, it's much more economic than conventional means of generation. What's your answer?
That's just an out and outright lie, because the cost of electricity from renewable sources is 3 to 4 times cheaper than nuclear. So basically, it costs it's between 38 and 44 pounds per megawatt hour for the range of renewable energy sources, and 150 pounds per megawatt hour for nuclear. And so that just, it just doesn't stack up. They're lying. And it's not just the cost of running it. There's also the cost of dealing with decommissioning these plants, which can run into, again, the hundreds of billions of pounds. And then, these fuel rods, just to cool them down takes, 10 years. You've got to put them in cool water. And so it's polluting your water. You're having excess heat in your water system. It's a whole catalog of costs. So the real costs of nuclear are not just the 150 pounds per megawatt hour that I said, but you're not even considering the additional costs of decommissioning and these other things. And then waste disposal is another huge area, which nobody knows how to deal with. I mean, the UK government's been studying the problem for nearly 50 years. And they can't find any community, not surprisingly, that's willing to accept this stuff. I mean, they're trying to do sort of bury it geologically off the coast of Cumbria, but scientists have said that the geology is totally unsuitable. It's just not going to work. They've been blasting the Solway Firth to try to find ways to bury this stuff. Meanwhile, we're accumulating more and more and more of it that we have no idea what to do with. I mean, as I said, it's complete insanity that they're pushing this.
I mean, it is crazy. I mean, if you landed here as somebody from Mars and you're listening to this broadcast, you would say, these people need to be certified. They're not only endangering themselves, but they're also putting in jeopardy future generations.
Totally. I mean, I call nuclear power a fiscal sinkhole, because that's exactly what it is. And Scots are being fed. I like this. I read this somewhere else. We're being given the mushroom treatment. We're being kept in the dark and fed a load of shite.
Yeah.
John, can I just jump in on the cost point, right? So, £45 billion. Say it quickly. That's 45 with 9 zeros behind it, right? So I did this exercise recently, but people lose track of the number. So if I was to say to you, how long would it take to pay back 45 billion if you're paying £1 million every day? £1 million every day. Just have a quick guess how long that would take. And if you stumble, I'll give you an answer quickly.
I prefer not to. My maths at this time of night are woeful.
Okay, so 45 billion.
My wife would endorse that, by the way. She would say, don't listen to him. Yeah.
Well, 45 billion would take you, if you're paying £1 million every day, that would take you 123 years. So it's got a rather long tail. That's just to build the bloody thing, right? And as like Leah said, we've got the cost of operation and the cost of decommissioning. The one thing I have a reasonable degree of experience on is constructing and operating power plants. My experience was combined cycle gas turbine based plants. And my calculation is we built the entire fleet basically at the start of the century of CCGTs, and it cost, and roughly 30 gigawatts of power. and it costs probably in the neighbourhood of £30 billion. Now, that's a big number again, but we're talking about for one plant, 3.2 gigawatts, and it's costing 45 billion. Now, the nuclear lobby are telling us we've learned the lessons. I heard that baloney from every project developer I've ever met. Who said, you know what, we learned the lessons the last time, and it's going to be a lot better.
Yeah.
So that become, I would say it's lies, it's mendacity, being maybe a theme of your call tonight. So that lie has already been exposed. They said we're achieving 20 to 30% savings versus on Sizewell versus Hinkley Point. So yesterday, the BBC exposed that unusually and said the cost has now risen from 30 billion up to, well, it was originally 20 billion, and then it moved up to 30 over a number of years. Now it's 38 billion. Now, my sense on that, if you've ever travelled from Edinburgh to London on a train and it gets in 20 minutes late in Newcastle, it never gets into London only 20 minutes late. It's a lot later, right? So my sense is the 38 billion is either lies or stupidity or downright baloney, right? So ever you take your pick. When we spoke before, and the last time I was on your podcast, I was questioning the GB Energy, and I was saying, are they stupid or are they being mendacious? And I'm starting to think they're just outright liars. Just call it what it is.
I wonder if it's just. I mean, I respect your view, and I'm sure you're probably absolutely right that it is mendacity. But having read some books on the way that Westminster operates or misoperates, and the latest one was with the Tory MP who used to be the Minister for Foreign Investment and stuff, Rory Stewart, Rory the Tory. His book is eye-opening, because what he describes is it's not just a political system that's woefully poor, and he goes into it in depth. It's the fact that Westminster is not fit for purpose. So it's no surprise that we end up with a service that's not fit for purpose, because it's being developed and overseen by an entity that's not fit for purpose. In other words, the classic Westminster view is that experts on tap, but never on top. In other words, we don't want experts running things. We want me, with my degree in Latin, to be running things. But I should be able to control you with your PhD in science, because that is the logic that I grew up with. And of course, it leads to the catastrophe we have now, where the people advising ministers have that skewed view of the world. So it's actually inbuilt, perhaps. It's not as if it was specific to a particular group of Westminster officials or one Westminster government. It's endemic in the system. And they can't rid themselves of it, because obviously, if I believe experts should be on tap but never on top, and two PhDs are sitting opposite me, and one is an expert in Greek and the other was an expert in science, I'm going to choose the Greek guy, because, hey, I can talk to him in Greek and we can have a chat and we can go to the club and have a few drinks afterwards. And I can't talk to the scientist because he could talk science to me. We can't have a conversation. I don't know any science. I don't want to know any science. But this guy will insist on talking science to me. So you can see it seems to me essentially where the problem is. But I wanted Leah to ask you a question about EDF. Now, people watching television and listening to radio will hear EDF. I suspect a lot of people don't quite know what these initials stand for.
Electricité de France. It's the French state-owned energy company, and it is owned by the French government, unlike our energy in the UK, which is all sold off and privatized. And so you've got all of this profiteering. In fact, the nuclear lobbyists will tell you, oh, the reason French energy prices are much lower is because they have all this nuclear. It provides about 70% of their electricity. Wrong. It's because they didn't privatize their energy. I mean, they do have their issues with nuclear, for sure. They've been having to shut down some plants there with 585 cracks in the graphite core. Well, we have 585 cracks at Torness, the last remaining nuclear power plant in Scotland. And they're not shutting it down. EDF has decided in its wisdom to extend its life to 2030, risking a nuclear meltdown. I mean, East Lothian is beautiful. That would be beyond tragic if that happened. But that's what they're playing with. But Electricité de France runs all of the nuclear power stations or plants in the UK. There are 8 of them. And, Scotland has 2, Hunterston B and Ayrshire, and it stopped running, but they're in the decommissioning phase, which is going to take a long time. And then Torness is the last one. And this meeting they had on the 1st of May in Dunbar, Nuclear Remade Britain, with this guy, Sam Richards, who's the CEO, a former Tory SPAD. He is pushing, reversing the ban. And Norman Hampshire is a Labour councillor in Dunbar. And I got the minutes of the meeting that someone attended. And this guy was saying that a lot of work is going on behind the scenes to ensure that Torness remains an active nuclear site. They want to put these small modular reactors there. Oh. And he said, otherwise, the UK would have to import energy, and Scotland can't just keep the energy to itself. He actually said that. So does he seriously claim to represent Scotland or the good citizens of Dunbar? I mean, for goodness sake, really?
Yeah. And I gather that Martin Whitfield, the Labour MSP for South Scotland, also said Scotland's position needs a change of government. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty tragic. Now, so EDF operates all the nuclear power stations in the UK.
That's right.
It also operates, did you say all of the nuclear power stations in France?
I don't know if it does all of the ones in France, but it's the national energy company. Yeah, presumably majority of them, yeah.
How do energy costs compare between France and the UK?
Well, again, because there's no profiteering in France, we've privatized everything here. They're far lower. I mean, John, you probably know better than I do, but I know that the French government capped energy price increases in France at 4%. Whereas what have we seen here in the UK? They've gone up multiple times that. And that's all down, I think, to profiteering and the price structure, as John says. When the marginal cost of the most expensive fuel is used to price your energy, that's crazy, and that's gas. So everything is wrong. I mean, really, Westminster is run by a bunch of dunces, and they're just lining their pockets. Presumably, maybe they're going to go get jobs in the nuclear industry when they get kicked out of Westminster or Sinecures or somewhere. But they're certainly not serving the people of this nation Scotland, certainly not, or the state of the UK.
So maybe just on that, John. So what the mechanism that was used for pricing or for paying EDF for the Hinkley Point C project, which is the one that's being constructed in Somerset. So that was done on the basis of the CFD model, contract for difference model, where there's a strike price agreed, and that insulates the project from the vagaries of the up and down of the market. So the strike price for Hinkley Point C was £89.50, but strangely, all of these CFD prices are all still cited based upon the 2012 number. Right? Wow. So when we see a number, they say that Hinkley C is £20, that is £89.50, and we compare that with renewables projects, etc. They're all based upon this 2012 reference point, which is an absolute another screen to hide behind, right? So let's get real and let's bring it up to when these next round of CFDs come forward, which is, I think they call it AR7. Let's get the pricing done on when these will get predicted to get into operation, right? But just to give a wee bit of that, the calculation I think is roughly 1.5 is the escalation from 2012. So that I think Hinkley C is going to be about £137 per megawatt hour for every megawatt hour it generates. Now, incidentally, we've picked up in the 2030s, some point in 2030s, it will start generating power. Very unreliably, incidentally, for the first while, because it'll be the first nuclear power plant commissioned since 1995. So good luck on that. I'd hate to be the guy at the other side of the grid operating that one. But we'll be paying, I think, by the time it goes live, in excess of £170 a megawatt hour. So I would like someone, I'd like Shanks or Sarwar to come and explain to me how that's going to reduce the electricity bill. How they're going to deliver a £300 a year saving on the electricity, the average electricity bill, when they're committed not just to 1 or 2 or 3 nukes, but a whole screed of them. I think the number I seen was 8, which is going to cost in excess of £300 billion. So somebody please come and explain it to me in simple terms how that's going to yield a reduction in your energy bills, because I can't even get the maths to work, right? And then, so, but that's right. Okay, that's what we spoke about Hinkley C. It gets worse for Sizewell C. They know that they can't crowd in the finance with that CFD model. So they've moved away from that. They're going to the regulated asset-based model, the RAB model, and we should look into that a little bit more. But basically, that's how many infrastructure projects are financed. But a lot of infrastructure projects have got a lot better track record in terms of delivery and schedule. What's going to happen is the risk of those projects, and we could go through the track record of, the commission this thing in 2008, Hinkley C in 2008, and it was meant to be giving the electricity to cook your Christmas dinner in 2017. That's what the chairman EDF said. So that good job we're not waiting for your dinner at that level. And here we are in 2025, and it's probably not going to deliver megawatts reliably till the early 2030s, right? That's again Hinkley C. Sizewell C, you can make it maybe 5 years later than that, but it's done in the RAB model, and the construction risk and price risk is on the taxpayer and ultimately the consumer. So I just like somebody, I'm a very humble guy, just come and sit down and show me the numbers and explain it to me, because Julia Pike, who's the CEO of Sizewell C, she was asked by the BBC on how's the project going, right? And she said it's on schedule and on budget. Now, John, you're a journalist. So what's missing from what's the next question? No question came. It was like, it's on schedule and budget. Thank you very much, Julia. Move on, right? We're
back to the classics again, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Most journalists have no scientific understanding.
You don't need to be a scientist. You need to just have a degree of curiosity to figure out. I'm love to know what you're telling me the price is going to be and the schedule is going to be, just to give a wee hint, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't asked, and so we're still waiting for that. So we make our own predictions.
I don't quite understand why you're quite so sceptical. I mean, after all, look at the great success of HS2. I mean, when Westminster is doing a major project, HS2 always comes to mind, which is that it never actually reached its final destination. It failed completely. It was overseen by incompetence, and they behaved incompetently because they were appointed by incompetence. I don't mean incompetent in the sense of being in any way lacking in intellect, not at all. I'm simply saying, I'm using the word incompetent in terms of not being competent to oversee the nature of the process and the product that they were overseeing. It's quite possible to be very intelligent and not have a single clue how to manage things.
The thing is, you're starting into this is going to be the third, a different episode again. We'll come back to infrastructure projects and why it's all going so badly. Again, there's an awful lot we could spend an hour on that.
We should do that. We can't do it tonight, obviously, because we don't have time. We're already hitting the 40-minute mark. But I wanted to there's an obvious question which everyone will be thinking of right now, Lee and John. And that is, what discussions have you had with the Scottish government on this?
Well, I mean, I haven't had any, obviously, directly myself. I've tried to interact with my useless MSP, Daniel Johnston, who's Labour in my area. And I do have as that list MP, Lorna Slater, who's Green. And I know the Greens oppose nuclear power. But they're up against this lobby, corporate lobby, and the Scottish government, I think, is being rather supine in not sort of more vigorously and aggressively countering some of the lies that they are telling the Scottish public. They conducted a poll, this Britain Remade campaign, and the question they asked was, should Scotland use new nuclear power to get to net zero? And I think it was like 53 or 4% of SNP voters said yes. But it was a very leading question. What they should have asked, and the Scottish government should have come back aggressively with this, is, do you want to pay 3 times more for your electricity and pay an additional cost per household of 4,600 quid, which is decommissioning, to have unsafe nuclear power when renewables are cleaner, cheaper, and safer? That's the question they should have been asked. But they're not giving the context. And the Scottish government, I think, needs to be much better at its messaging and be much more aggressive and come out punching and fighting, and they're not.
Who is the minister in Scotland responsible for oversight of nuclear power or energy? Who is it?
Do you know
Gillian Martin, I think is her name. I haven't spoken to anyone in the Scottish government. I mean, I just don't have. I'm not that.
Why can't you pick up the phone and call them?
I'm happy to. I'll happily make my contact details available. Happy to speak to any politician of any stripe.
In order to help the process along, I'm going to make this suggestion tonight. Is that I strongly suggest that each of you contacts a government minister to get some time to talk this through. But also at the same time, I issue a general invitation to all the government ministers who have some connection with energy pricing, energy development, planning permission for nuclear power stations, whatever. If they want to come on the show and explain to us how they are working this process, then I'd be happy to give them time to do so, like I have with you guys. But because I think it's awfully important. But my worry is this: the fact that no one's contacted you, I find troubling, because it speaks to, I mean, for example, when I and Dr. Elliot Bulmer were trying to convince the Scottish government that they ought to have a constitution, a process, by the way, that took us 10 years to get any real traction. We found this ironic because the entity that we wanted to talk with placed itself to major constitutional reform, but wasn't in a position to talk about constitutions in general, which we found remarkable. I mean, every single group of people who wanted to sever connections with another partner or whatever, the first thing they would say is, well, to reassure everyone, we've written our own constitution, and that tells you we're not going to behave like complete idiots if you vote for us or join our army or whatever, in the case of the United States, for example. You know, there was a declaration, things were written down, it was clear, people knew what they were fighting for, they knew what they were voting for. That seemed to be missing, and it took a long time. But along the way, we kept bumping into various odds and sods of lawyers who asked us the most arcane questions. I'll give you an example. In a multi-page submission, Elliot Bulmer put in a throwaway remark about we think the monarchy should probably continue in independent Scotland, but it would be down to the first independence government to decide if that's a good thing or not. I thought that was very straightforward. We ended up spending 2 hours with 2 lawyers asking us about the nuances of this. And I thought, this. I'll tell you what, it was akin to being asked how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. It was utterly irrelevant. And it was a complete waste of everyone's time. And it worried me because it left me with the impression that nobody was taking this seriously at all. Because
you know, it's interesting.
If the person is serious, it's a bit like if somebody had asked you, Lee, what does green energy mean? And you think, oh boy, we've gone right back to that wasn't what I was expecting. I was happy to talk about the price differentials, all these sort of stuff, but that something as basic as that, which is, but it was that sort of thing. Sorry,
Yeah.
I interrupted you. I didn't mean to do
No, I was just going to say it's interesting. The constitutional question which you raised is also important on this issue because Scotland is supposed to be a nation with popular sovereignty as its constitutional tradition. In other words, the people should have the final say. There is something called the Scotland Referendums Act 2020. And the Scottish administration, I'm not going to call it a government because it's not a government. It's a devolved administration. It's being controlled by Westminster. Ultimately, we know that. But they could still use this Referendums Act if they had a campaign and let the people decide whether or not they want more nuclear power in Scotland. Just like in 1994, do you remember the Greater Strathclyde Regional Council organized a referendum when the Tories down in London wanted to privatize Scotland's wonderful water? And they organized this referendum, and 97% of Scots who voted said, hell no, we want it to stay in public hands, which is why it did. So, this is the tools are there. And I think people would get behind this if they knew the facts and we had an information campaign and a real debate. Like in 2014, you guys remember how exciting Scotland was. People were actually debating issues. And now there's this sort of lethargy and despair. And, people are just, because they know they're not going to be listened to.
Yeah.
But we should demand our rights, the popular sovereignty, and the only governance system that works with that is direct democracy, where we have referendums, where people can actually launch referendums on issues that impact them, like this.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've been talking to people from Switzerland who've been very eloquent on the whole matter of direct democracy, and it sounds terribly impressive. And also,
people need to sign PE 2135 on the Scottish Parliament website, which would implement the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights.
Yeah, I mean, none of this is rocket science. I mean, This is awfully straightforward, and also it is hard to resist the argument that I think Leslie Ruddock says that the Scottish executive is very happy inside its little cage. Because it doesn't find the bars in any way inhibiting, but rather comforting. The knowledge that you're circumscribed it's warming. It means that you don't have to make decisions for yourself. And also, people come and impose upon you, so you don't have to do any strategic thinking. But within the confines of that, you can busy jump up and down and knock over your water through, but you're not actually going to change the bars, because that's not part of what you're about. Besides, the person controlling the cage would get upset if you did that. You don't really want to do that because they might stop feeding you and they might stop giving you. I mean, it's just, the whole thing is crazy. It seems to me you end up in exactly the position we're in just now.
John Swinney said, like at the SMU conference a year ago, he said, if you give the Scottish people the tools, they can build any society that they want, any nation that they want. The problem is they're not giving us the tools, which are the tools of direct democracy. We've talked about referendums, initiatives.
I couldn't agree more. We've had so many people on the show saying, give us that opportunity. And for some reason, it never ever quite happens. We've had people on the show, for example, who live in the Isles, and they have to travel 300 miles to go to a council meeting. Wow. I mean, I ask you, I used to go back and forth to Arran from time to time, and I always enjoyed that. But the notion that you had to go from Arran to somewhere on the mainland to have a discussion about what's happening in Brodick struck me as bizarre. I mean, why would you want to have to do that? And when we've spoken to people who've travelled hundreds of miles to Loch Gilford just to have a discussion, I mean, it's just the technology is all there. I mean, we're using it just now.
Of course.
John, you're in Arran. Leah, you're in Edinburgh. I'm in the south of Spain. You would never know.
No.
Apart from my rather odd appearance, you would never really know. I mean, you wouldn't, seriously. I mean, because we're using the technology. And all we needed is somebody gifted like Kevin to oversee the whole process and put it all together. But I mean, the Scottish government should go out and hire Kevin and say, here, you've made a great success of this. Why don't you do this nationally? I mean, they complain about the BBC all the time. It's in your own hands. You could do this. Yeah. A government minister could do this every day. What we're doing just now. I mean, I'd be happy to ask the questions if it helped them, but we're willing to do that. It's crazy. We've got 10 minutes. Give us your sort of Somebody, each of you, can I start with you, John?
Well, yes.
Imagine you're talking to a government minister just now and saying, look, these are the essential elements of the argument that I'm trying to make. What would you be saying to that government minister right now?
So one of the things we haven't really touched upon in the call here is some of the things that the nuke lobby say that why it's needed, right? So we're quite well rehearsed in the fact that we've got a surplus of energy, etc., and it's valid, right? But what they lead on is that renewables suffer from intermittency, right? I.e., that sometimes the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing, right? That happens, and we have also the concept of anti-cyclonic weather systems can hit us from time to time in the winter time when you've actually got very high demand. So we've got the concept of intermittency, which renewables are challenged with. And there's another concept, and we could go into a raft of these, but the other one is the idea of grid stability and managing the frequency in the grid. So the nuke lobby try to make a big thing that renewables don't have that, and then nukes have that. Now, number one, the nukes will be offering nothing to support those concepts anytime soon, right? So that's not number one. But when they ever finally show up, there are many other ways of delivering the capacity. We've mentioned earlier combined cycle gas turbines, which are meant to get phased out, which incidentally will not happen. But there will transition combined cycle plants eventually to maybe burn a blend of methane and hydrogen. I think that will come to pass. So we've got various capacity solutions. We've got demand management solutions. We've got tidal energy solutions. We've got the whole concept of hydrogen, which we haven't even started to explore, which is a massive opportunity for Scotland. Hydrogen effectively as a energy storage solution, so you can help smooth the grid. So that there's a massive amount of ways of managing the capacity to manage intermittency. Right. So again, we could talk more in detail about that. The other item is the concept of grid stability, and again, you need heavy machines which give you inertia. Just the weight of these gas turbines, steam turbines. Wind turbines don't provide that. But again, we have many other solutions. I mentioned the gas turbines. There are also developments of synthetic inertia. So there are various technological developments that answer any question that the nuke lobbies can come up with, trying to make a scare about the lacking or any failures on the part of renewables. So that all those things are being worked through. And again, we could get into a lot of detail, but we're running out of time. So I'll let give Leah another kick of the cat.
Okay, thanks, John. Leah?
Yeah, well, just to sort of recap what we've been discussing, I came up with this kind of silly but easy to remember mnemonic acronym, NEWS, that nuclear power is not needed. It's not economic, clearly not economic. It's not wanted if people knew the facts about it, and it's certainly not safe. And then it really gets down to what we were discussing too about our system of governance. We basically are operating under parliamentary sovereignty, which is an English concept. It's been imposed onto Scotland. Holyrood is a Westminster mini-me. And if you actually want to be true to Scotland's constitutional tradition and its roots, then we're talking about power of the people or popular sovereignty. And we need to challenge the Scottish administration that it needs to use the powers that it has to give us these tools that we desperately need to change society here in Scotland. And the only way we're going to do that is by putting enough pressure on them. Politicians will never react otherwise. Yeah. What are they most concerned about? They want to get reelected. And I agree with John that this is a huge issue for 2026, and they should really, if they're serious about doing what's best for Scotland and its people, then they should be pounding the drum of why Scotland does not need more nuclear power, given the blessings we have with renewables. And Scotland is probably the most richly endowed nation with natural resources and smart people as well of any nation on earth. And yet we don't have the agency to use those resources to benefit the Scottish people. And that's a tragedy. That's a real tragedy. And you look at a country like Norway, which is very similar to Scotland. They have no nuclear power. They also have extremely devolved, localized government. They have like 400 or 500 local authorities, as opposed to our, 32 or something, which is crazy big for Scotland, the size it is. You have people having to travel hours to get to a council meeting. That's absurd. And then people feel like their representatives are not listening to them because guess what? They're not. So our system is just really not fit for purpose, as you were saying earlier, John, in the introduction. Not just Westminster, but Holyrood, because they're really the same. So, I would encourage people who are listening to really try to just take the first step by forcing the Scottish administration to implement the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. It's a UN covenant the UK ratified back in 1976. And Article 1 says all people have the right to self-determination. We don't have that in Scotland, and we need it.
I mean, it's hard to argue with anything that you and John have said tonight. I mean, it's been it's been by degrees enlightening and somewhat concerning, but always challenging and always informative. And that's what we aim to do on this show. We aim to educate, inform, and entertain. And you guys have done that, and it's not easy. I mean, because particularly if you're enthusiastic about something, is that the enthusiasm communicates itself, but not everyone understands the background. So you have to spend a bunch of your time working through all of that, and it's laborious. I know it's laborious because I know I did this for years with the Constitution, and I was constantly talking to people where I'd explained 2 years before why it was important and explaining again 2 years later why it's important. And so I can understand to some degree the frustration in having to repeat the same message over and over again. But let me reassure you, from what I've heard and seen tonight, you do this with eloquence. All you're missing is an audience. That's it, in essence. And I'm afraid, and I hesitate to say this, but I think it's the case, you're going to have to make the audience. You're going to have to go out there, and I'm afraid, and grab people by the lapels because I suspect they're not going to come to you because that's the nature of the process, which you have so clearly defined, Leah, which is that everyone in a position of power, the main focus is to get re-elected. And that's unless you can couple what you have to say with their chances of being re-elected, then it's really hard to get their attention because that's the primary focus. But then they should bear in mind this dictum, which applies universally in my experience, is that all political careers end in failure. So the question is, do you want that failure to happen quickly, or do you want to try and delay it for some time? That's the choice. It's not that it's not going to happen. It's the fact that you can delay it somewhat and perhaps confuse people into thinking it was somebody else's fault. But the reality is that's the business they are in, and it's not easy for them, and I understand that. But I think the way you guarantee becoming a failure is to close your eyes and ears, because you don't get to sense these things that look small now but become major very quickly, because you've cut yourself off from the information sources. And that's the last thing anybody should do, particularly in the world we live in today.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I want to end by thanking you both very much indeed, because I found it eye-opening, and judging by the responses we've had tonight, other people do too. So I wish you every success in what you're trying to do. And if you feel that there's a time when you want to come back and talk some more about what's happening or why it's not happening, then feel free to give Kevin a call, please. So with that, I'd like to say thank you. I'd like to say also to thank you for everyone watching and listening tonight. You need to go out there, everyone, and do what Leah and John is doing, which is grabbing the body politic by the lapels and saying, hey guys, you need to listen to this because it's important for you and it's important for the rest of us. So with that, let me say thank you very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week at the same time, 7:30, where we'll be talking with Joe. So good night. Take care, everyone. Look after each other.
Bye.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank
Well
you.
done.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.